I'm Professor David Wilson. As a criminologist, I'm often asked, what's it like to interview a murderer?
As you can see here, everything in this room is audio taped.
To answer this question, I'm going to take you on a journey into the dark heart of the police interrogation room. Using cutting-edge lip-sync technology, we'll bring to life the actual taped confessions of some of the world's most notorious killers.
I put tape on her mouth, held it there so she couldn't breathe.
And bring you face to face with evil.
I felt sick looking at him, knowing what he did.
And along with forensic psychologist, Professor Michael Brooks, I'll analyze their interviews in unparalleled detail.
Her skull gave way a little bit. She was there immediately unconscious.
Their wicked words, now seen spoken for the very first time, will never be forgotten.
So I didn't suggest to him that we kill her on Sunday, but I knew that she had to be gone.
The killer in today's program is perhaps the most infamous serial killer that no one has ever heard of. In 40 hours of interviews, he talked of many different murders, and authorities believe there were in excess of a dozen. He had developed the perfect serial killing persona and plan until he murdered his final victim, Samantha Koenig, too close to home. In fact, in his own hometown of Anchorage in Alaska. Prior to this, all of his victims had been murdered across the many different states of America. This makes him a transient serial killer and therefore much more difficult to detect. In addition, as an ex-military man, his murders were plotted in great detail, down to him burying caches of murder weapons or kill kits in the ground at multiple locations. His interrogation is characterized by his total command of the interview room and the situation in which he finds himself. We see clear traits of his psychopathy on display, ranging from his grandiose manner, attempts at manipulation, and his boredom at being questioned by those whom he considers to be his inferiors. Ultimately, he denied his victims justice by taking his own life before he could be tried for his crimes. Who is this serial killer who took many of his secrets to the grave? Israel Keyes. When police pulled Israel Keyes over in March 2012, it had all the hallmarks of a typical speeding ticket stop. The out-of-state plates on the vehicle aroused the officer's suspicions, as did Keyes' aloof manner to their questions. Those suspicions were confirmed when, in the trunk of his vehicle, they found what could perhaps be described as a kidnap kit, an array of items including a ski mask and zip ties. And alongside them was the mobile phone and bank card of a young woman reported missing thousands of miles away. Her name was Samantha Koenig. From the outset, Keyes was determined to portray himself as an enigma to the detectives who tried to question him. The interrogations reached a turning point when the FBI arrived. They believed Keyes may have been responsible for multiple murders committed in a multitude of states. With the FBI before him, Keyes now relished the opportunity to face off against his inquisitors. For him, this was all a game of the mind. Claiming to speak on only his own terms, his ploy was to drip-feed investigators information. For Keyes, this was all about power and control, to prolong the interview sessions and heighten the anticipation of new information that may help to identify any other victims.
Morning. Morning, Israel. All right.
Gradually, Keyes would reveal the horrific details of his secret cycle of crime that had lasted nearly a decade and cost a number of lives.
There were ways that I could manipulate this situation in this case to my benefit and on my timeline by withholding information and giving information out.
What's fascinating about this case, for me, is that Israel Keyes breaks all the rules that we normally associate with serial killers.
He's very unusual in the sense that he's willing to travel thousands of miles to set up his kills.
So he'd often get on an aeroplane, fly to a location, hire a car, drive hundreds of miles. He had no particular victim type. He killed all different types of people.
It was a man who was thoughtful about his offences, meticulous in his plan.
What he would do in some cases is have these murder kits that he would bury.
It's as if he sees what he's doing as him being deployed into an area, carrying out his mission and then moving out again.
So he was always going to be a man who was difficult to catch.
Had the police not had a stroke of luck with him, he would have probably got away with it for many, many years, if not forever.
It's interesting, his name is Israel, and yet he was brought up in a Mormon family.
He didn't go to school, he was homeschooled by his parents, and he was certainly brought up with a very strong sense of right and wrong and very religious values instilled into him.
He was very much considered a loner, and that's what he was comfortable with.
As a youngster, Keyes moved with his family to Stevens County, Washington. Whilst there, he attended the extreme evangelical church school known as the Ark.
So he's got that kind of indoctrination of the kind of right-wing ethos in his childhood.
As he progressed through adolescence, these hateful teachings began to manifest themselves in a desire to find a means to express his hateful thoughts. He believed the best outlet for his growing desire to express his thoughts of violence was to join the army.
His time in the army meant that he picked up certain skills that were vital to when he carried out his crimes.
The way of thinking that he would have learnt in the military to someone with these kinds of views was dangerous. It interacted with those prejudicial views, giving him a way forward, a way to actually act those out.
They trained him to be a marksman. They taught him how to kill with a gun, with detachment.
He was very good at observing people. He was very good at scouting out the best locations in which he could carry out his crimes and wouldn't be caught.
The potential for these types of narratives lie dormant in people like Israel Keyes, and all it takes is some trigger. The trigger here was unquestionably his discharge from the military, and that activated this whole narrative in which he's the honourable hero.
Keyes left the army in 2001. He had served 3 years, by which time he was a highly skilled and decorated marksman.
When he came out, he entered into that kind of rootless nomadic lifestyle and drifted until he eventually ended up in Alaska.
He sets up a construction business, and at the same time, he claims he was robbing banks. The issue of robbing banks is quite important because although he had a construction business and was quite successful, he says he robbed banks to pay for his killing. So it makes sense if he's actually trying to separate his killing behaviour from his ordinary life.
For the successful serial killers, part of their very inner psychology is that they can operate, function normally while still at the same time killing multiple people.
But the question still remains, why did he go on to kill? Especially when the victims he targeted didn't emerge from any obvious target group. And this was a question he was determined to make very difficult for those interrogating him to answer, because he was a man who liked to talk in riddles.
There is no one who knows me, or who has ever known me, who knows anything about me, really. They know they're going to tell you something that does not line up with anything I tell you, because I'm two different people, basically. And the only person who knows about what I'm telling you, the kind of things I'm telling you, is me.
How long have you been two different people?
Long time. 14 years.
Gosh, split personality. Nobody will ever know the real Israel Keyes. Do you buy that? Do you buy the split personality?
I don't. I mean, there's aspects to his personality, but I think he's in control of who he is. If he's been planning it, then actually he's fully in control through the whole time. With a split personality, you tend to switch between one persona and another and not have the connection with it. He knew exactly what he was doing in the planning.
Of course, the difficulty about being a transient serial killer is ultimately it costs money. And of course, does that then lead to him committing various frauds or bank robberies?
It leads to him committing bank robberies, but it's also part of the thrill of undertaking the activity. We know that one of the reasons why he perpetuated these offences was because of the adrenaline rush that he got. And it was very extensive planning, and the meticulousness of it would be something that he would have relished and enjoyed.
Most serial killers particularly will have a script for the way that a murder will unfold, but they will also have a particular victim type that they will be looking for. And in this case, in the case of Israel Keyes, he really didn't. He was indiscriminate in who he targeted, and it was all, I think, about the opportunity. So actually he was more driven by the location rather than the victim.
Remote areas where camper vans may park up for a stop, for a rest or a picnic. So areas where people automatically wouldn't be noticed missing because they were transient.
Committing a murder in New York State, committing one in Washington State, thousands of miles difference. There's no way the local police are going to identify him as a serial killer. He had hiding spots where he hid the weapons and the material that he was going to use for his abduction of his victims. They ranged, according to him, from Washington, New York, and possibly places like Texas and Arizona. He claims that he actually hid the weapons and the material so that he could then go and pick his victim.
Back when I was smart, I would let them come to me. Come go to a remote area that's not anywhere near where you live, but that other people go to as well. You might not get exactly what you're, not much to choose from in a manner of speaking, but there's also no witnesses really. There's nobody else around.
Quite a lot of information in terms of those clips. Let's deal with this modus operandi point that he reveals, that he's like a spider in a web waiting for people to come to him as opposed to him going out searching for victims. That's quite unusual, isn't it?
Not necessarily. I mean, although it's rarer. So whereas a stalker will stalk an individual and follow them, what he's doing is stalking an area. He's laying out a trap and waiting for people to come into his lair.
He was quite happy to delay until the opportunity of safe killing presented itself. He was extremely methodical and efficient. The military, I think, had armed him with a full and impressive skill set.
As Keyes' interviews with detectives and the FBI continue to unfold, It's clear he's taking a great deal of pleasure in the knowledge that he holds information the authorities desperately want. He's playing a well-thought-out game, something clearly evidenced by his continued composure and air of superiority. The murder of his final victim, Samantha Koenig, only came to light because he killed her in his hometown and his movements were captured on CCTV. This uncharacteristic lack of planning on his behalf is out of sync with the killing persona he'd carefully nurtured. But just why did he do this? In my experience, it's wrong to say serial killers want to be caught. But when authorities discover information on a home computer that details one of his earlier murders, that of a married couple called the Couriers, he makes no attempt to deny the crime. In fact, he relishes the opportunity to reveal details of his MO. But once again, this is part of his game plan, to reveal a little information, but not the whole story, which gives him both power over his interrogators and control of the interview room. Keyes' career as a serial killer would last many years. At the core of his ability to evade capture was the fact he was highly organized and planned each of his murders and the disposal of his victims in fine detail. But as is so often the case with serial killers, they become so convinced of their own invincibility that it leads to them taking greater and greater risks, including killing closer and closer to home. And the murder which would seal Keyes' fate would take place in his hometown of Anchorage.
Samantha Koenig was Israel Keyes' last known victim. She was an 18-year-old barista at a local coffee booth.
All his previous murders were very well planned, organized. For some reason, he decided to kill a local person and he didn't think about being identified.
These people become emboldened. They get almost a sense of invincibility. And he probably in his own warped mind thought, why should I travel all the way to Texas when there's a girl down the road that will do just as well?
Or maybe the opportunity was presented to him in his home environment and it was just too good an opportunity in his eyes to actually walk away from.
While he was able to lead this secret life and stay one step ahead of everybody and live this high-octane, risky life of murder and robbery, he felt probably empowered and quite enriched by the whole experience. His one mistake, of course, is to murder somebody on his own doorstep.
Keyes took Koenig to a remote cabin location. Once there, she was bound and gagged to prevent her escape. And then she was subjected to an unrelenting series of sexual assaults.
The victims are nameless. They are simply members of the enemy for him. Who they are as people matters not. What matters is that they are part of the enemy, part of legitimate targets for his campaign.
If somebody is prepared to commit the sorts of crimes that Israel Keyes was, nothing else matters. They are just an object to serve the needs of that offender.
Her ordeal only ended when Keyes strangled her to death. The murder of Samantha Koenig broke every rule of Keyes' own killing codebook. Not only had he abducted and killed the young woman on his doorstep, but he had made no plan or provision for the disposal of her body. Believing the isolated cabin to be a secure location to store her body, he used whatever was at hand to create a makeshift cover for the corpse before locking the cabin up. As his victim lay dead on the floor, Keyes went on vacation, taking a cruise to New Orleans. But Samantha Koenig was soon missed by those close to her, and a nationwide search ensued. And CCTV was soon released, showing a disguised Keyes abducting her from the coffee shop where she worked. When Keyes returned from his holiday, he believed he could profit from Samantha Koenig's disappearance, and the fact that no one other than him knew she was dead. He returned to Samantha Koenig's body. Despite the fact it had started to decompose, he staged her so that she appeared to be alive, and then photographed her next to a current copy of the Anchorage Times newspaper. He proceeded to send the picture to Samantha's parents, and using her phone, demanded a ransom from them if they ever wanted to see their daughter alive again.
He had demanded a $30,000 ransom for her return, but Samantha was already dead.
Samantha's parents, desperate for their daughter's safe return, didn't alert the authorities and followed Keyes' instruction to deposit $30,000 into their daughter's account. With the money transfer complete, he disposed of Samantha's body in a lake north of Anchorage. But his greed was about to lead to his downfall.
Then stupidly went on a spending spree effectively across the southern states, taking money out of bank accounts.
He's filmed taking money out of the ATM using her card. He's also filmed when he rented a car, so they were able to link up the two photographs and show who it was.
They become careless, and that's when they fall foul.
Even though he went such lengths throughout his criminal career to maintain his freedom by planning and keeping the links between him and his victims impossible to detect, at the end of it, he still had a victim's bank card that he used, and it was killing in his own hometown that meant that he was finally arrested.
My position has been that I want to talk to them about the Koenig case and find out, where we stand with that. But you know we can't do that. They can't do that right now. Right.
Now, that for me is very interesting because, of course, this last murder is completely and utterly different from his first sequence of murders. He's killed a local girl, for one thing. Does that for you suggest, because lots of people when they talk to us think that that means that they're trying to be caught, is that what's going on? He believes he's going to be caught if he behaves like this?
Not necessarily, but I think we are into an area of speculation because there isn't any form of indication of why he's done it. So if we're speculating, then we know that he's a person who likes adrenaline, then actually is this the next challenge? And we know that with serial killers, it's the excitement. Was he trying to do something a bit different?
So the challenge, if I pick you up rightly, is that he no longer becomes this geographically transient serial killer, but a stable serial killer. He's going to target the Koenig girl in Anchorage itself, and indeed he's going to be caught on CCTV using her credit card. Do you think that's just about a challenge, or do you think that's because he thinks by this stage he is so powerful he can get away with it?
He's miscalculated. He didn't know he was going to get caught by using the bank card, and that there'd be a video camera there recording that, and also picking up the car rental plate. So that wasn't a factor in his calculations.
I find it quite ironic that in the end, the blinkeredness, the prejudice which drove this man to kill was the same psychological process that got him caught in the end. It was his inability to see things from the perspective of anybody else that in the end catches up with him.
Even if we take every precaution, we ultimately make mistakes, whatever we do, and are held accountable. For many of us, it's of no consequence. For him, it was the end.
Keyes' frustrating tactic of offering officers a little information only to withdraw his further cooperation has now set a dangerous precedent for his interrogators. He's clearly playing a one-sided game with them, and it's headed for checkmate, because unlike most killers who get caught, Keyes seems unconcerned about his fate and makes no attempt to plea bargain. The reason for this only becomes clear when you realize that he had no intention of standing trial and would take his own life before going to court. The only thing he seems preoccupied with is his own reputation and not wanting to be viewed in the same light as other serial killers who've made the headlines. He considers himself to be more important than them, and his killing to have been carried out for his own secret and higher purpose. And so he issues his final ultimatum. He wants his own name to be kept out of the press if he's to give the authorities any more help as to the whereabouts and identities of any of his other victims.
The really interesting thing with Israel Keyes is there is no real motive behind the murders. These weren't people he knew, they weren't people that had wronged him. He just wanted to target people and he just wanted to kill them because he wanted to get away with it.
Through the first several hours of his interviews with detectives and the FBI, Keyes was proving to be impenetrable. And despite those present being convinced the murder of Samantha Koenig was not an isolated incident, they remained puzzled. The pattern of Keyes' murders didn't fit the profile of any serial killer they'd ever met before. Yet after hours of grandstanding with his interrogators, Keyes finally reached an impasse and laid out the terms on which he would cooperate and provide information. Astonishingly, he was concerned about his reputation and demanded his name be kept out of the newspapers in return for information about the identity of other victims. Keyes proceeded to talk about the murders of Bill and Lorraine Courier, a couple who had disappeared without trace thousands of miles away in Vermont.
I'll give you the location of this house, but I don't want the locals involved.
The power and control that he yielded over this entire investigation by informing the police where the Courier family, where they were to be found, that was bizarre, because what he was doing there, he was relishing the whole investigation and the fact that what was happening was all to do with his work.
Although Keyes didn't want that publicity, he enjoyed the notoriety, and he really did toy with his interviewers. He turned it into his own show.
I told you from the get-go, before I told you where the freaking bodies were left, I told you that I didn't want the locals involved. The first thing you do is make a big scene, do a big freaking archaeological dig right alongside the main road. I didn't see any reason to bring anyone back there in that area into the fold, so to speak, as to what was going on. Because they didn't have any clue anyway. You know, next thing I know, there's like articles in the paper, like this big dig site going on. You know, there was a lot more discreet ways to handle it, you know.
Despite Keyes' claims that the authorities had betrayed his confidence, investigators were able to piece together the final movements of the Couriers. Several years previously, Keyes had travelled to Essex County in Vermont. Whilst there, he buried one of his kill kits in a remote wooded area. Then, in 2011, he returned and unearthed the kit. Under the canopy of the trees, he sat patiently in wait until anyone, crossed his path so he could murder them. And on that day, it was Mr. and Mrs. Courier.
He openly admits he used what we call a blitz approach, not all guns blazing, but certainly gun waving, rather than having any contact or building up a confidence with them.
From there, he took them to a farmhouse.
Armed with a gun and zip ties, he broke into the home of the Couriers and cut the phone lines.
During this event, Bill has come off the stool where he left him and tries to run. At about 50 years old, Bill is no match for Israel Keyes, who is young, who is fit, who has been in the army. And so he shoots Bill, and Lorraine has to watch. After he's done that, he sexually assaults Lorraine and then he kills her. When he's finished, he bundles the bodies up and he dumps them.
You know about Lake Crescent in Washington? How deep is it? I think that lake is 500 to 700 feet deep. They've never been to the bottom of it. There's people who have gone off that lake, and they still haven't found their cars or anything. And that's the lake. That's one.
That's actually quite chilling, I think, because this is about his abduction and murder of the couriers who disappear. This is really what brings him to national attention in the United States. Does he make a mistake, Michael, in your view, about talking so openly about the lake? Because is that revealing to us, or revealing to the detectives, potentially where there might be other victims?
Well, it could be, but he's only talking about a case that he knows that detectives have knowledge of. So he's just talking around things that they're familiar with. But there's also the question is, would he have actually led them to the right place? We know from other serial killers that they think they know where it is, they think they can lead the police there, the police dig, and there's nothing. So the police can't always rely upon what serial killers say.
So there's this idea again of trying to only allow the kind of information that he wants to be given, this idea that he wants to be in control of the process, even over how the bodies of the couriers would be found. Okay, let's listen to the next tape.
Like I said from the beginning, there's certain aspects of the things that I've done that I would prefer never became public.
If something else were to get out, and especially in a different area or something, you know, and now there's the whole Nia Bay aspect of it now too, you know, it's like my kids living in Nia Bay now, and gossip is the town pastime, so.
He didn't want the local community to know that he was involved. This idea of protecting his reputation, protecting his image, even though he's arrested for murder. That kind of moral double standard seems to be riven through a number of murderers I've worked with.
But he also wants to present himself in a certain way. So he doesn't want to be seen in the way that the police are portraying him and the media are portraying him, whereas in fact that's the reality. So he wants the public to have a distorted perception of who he is.
The problem is nowadays, the more stuff my name is attached to, the more likely it is that somebody's going to try to do some kind of stupid frickin' TV special. You know how it is nowadays, like with all this true crime that people are obsessed with.
Now, that's interesting, isn't it? That sense in which a stupid TV special, that concern for his reputation, even though this is somebody who's committed murder. Where does that come from?
Well, it may be that actually he's saying that, but that's not what he really wants. He really does want a TV series. He wants to be popular. He wants to be at the front and to have his story told.
News of Keyes' involvement in the deaths of the Couriers began to spread across the media. Yet he was still determined to maintain whatever little control he had over his life, and this included demanding that the state take it and execute him.
Well, there's another factor that just occurred to me recently with the sentencing portion is if whoever happens to be sentencing me knows that the death penalty is what I want.
Well, that's why we're here to negotiate. You have stuff you want, we have stuff we want. Yeah, can we promise you absolutes? No. Yeah, we're just both doing our best to try to come to some sort of resolution.
He didn't see his life as something he valued beyond that love that he had of successfully killing.
He sees himself as someone who has been caught by the enemy, and to kill himself is the only honourable way forward. He sees this as the only honourable course of action open to him.
He cuts his wrist and he strangles himself with a bedsheet.
Why does he commit suicide?
Because in one sense he doesn't want to carry on living the life that he's lived. He knows he can't commit further offences. He doesn't want to spend the rest of life in prison, so he ends it.
Is it the ultimate form of giving control back to him? He's going to decide that he'll take his life rather than a court, a judge, a jury.
It is, and we know other serial killers who take their own lives because they want that ultimate control to determine whether or not they're going to live.
Even when it came to his conviction, he was still in control. He still dictated the terms. He left a 3 or 4 page note, an ode to murder, which was blood-soaked under him. This is the last thing he did. This is the last thing he wrote. It was an ode to murder.
If you want to be famous as a serial killer, you deny your offences, you go to court, they hear all the juicy, horrible details of what happened, people remember your name. If you admit to the crime, you don't get the same press attention. And if you commit suicide before trial, then you get even less attention. He stops the trial progressing. That way, he doesn't get the attention.
During his lengthy interviews with the police, Keyes expressed no remorse for his crimes and utter contempt for the whole justice process. Under questioning, he also alluded to other possible victims. His final tally may have gone into double figures. Koenig and the Couriers are the only victims named by Keyes because he knew that the authorities had tied him to their deaths. The names and the last resting place of the others he would take to his own grave, and in doing so, deny his victims any dignified burial of their own. Keyes wanted his interviewers to believe he was an enigma. But Keyes was no enigma. He was a narcissist who put the perpetuation of his own self-myth before the truth. And the simple truth is that he was a man who killed because he enjoyed it. Keyes' suicide left investigators frustrated by the many secrets of his crimes, which he took to the grave. But the FBI continued to replay his interviews and trawl through their records, looking at mysterious disappearances that he may have been connected with. One of these included a woman by the name of Deborah Feldman. She'd been a sex worker in New Jersey who had last been seen near her home in Hackensack. The authorities began to suspect that she'd been abducted and drugged by Keyes, who had then driven hundreds of miles to a place called Tupper Lake. With her defenseless in the trunk of his car, he had stepped out and robbed a bank. The crime caught on CCTV. Investigators believe that Keyes then travelled to the lake, where after killing Deborah Feldman, he weighted her body and cast her into the water. During his interviews, interrogators believed he had alluded to an unnamed victim finding such a watery grave by asking and posing a series of questions about Tupper Lake. Yet once again, on being questioned about the details of the crime, instead of giving a straight answer, he delighted in toying with his interrogators. One of Keyes' most outrageous claims was that to elaborate on his crimes would only add to his notoriety, something he was allegedly against.
I don't know how deep it was. I know the general area. I had a fish finder, but it didn't register how deep it was. I just know it was over.
Maxed out at 100 feet.
If you think we're way under you were talking about it, drop down to 80.
No, he's laying out and covering up at exactly the same time, which is something that we're both familiar that lots of murderers will do.
Yes.
And why is that? Why do they want to lay out and cover up at the same time?
To try and prevent detection, because they want to carry on doing what they're doing. You know that there's more offences. I know that there's more offences that I've committed, but you haven't really got a clue about that information, and I'm not going to tell you.
And that's about power, and that's about control.
How long does a body last in a freshwater lake? I mean, because there's no critters that eat
It depends how.
bodies in
It depends how
freshwater lakes, right?
deep. I learned a lot.
Because it depends how deep the
Depends how deep
temperature
it
of
is,
the water.
and if the body's contained in something.
And it's not critters, it can be like
Bacteria.
organisms.
Here we've got Keyes being incredibly interested in police work itself, in detection itself. What's going on there?
He's wanting to know what the police really know, and does their knowledge correlate with his knowledge? So he would have known that if you put a body into water, it will decompose. What he's checking out is how long that will be for. Is the police understanding the same as his? Do they know more than him? But also, it could be connected with those other murders that he's committed, and how close are the police to actually tracking down those?
He almost admits to doing other killings, apart from actually saying it, and then refuses point blank to give them any pointers as to where the bodies may be, or to make it easy for the police. He just used the situation to annoy and toy with the police.
I almost feel guilty. Costing the taxpayers a lot of money to find them. But just kept my mouth shut.
It is remarkable that when Israel Keyes is told how much it's costing to excavate the bodies of his horrible killing spree, that his reaction is to say they should not bother. It shows just how deeply entrenched the prejudice is, that he genuinely sees these other people as the enemy, and therefore it makes no sense to spend any money on them, even when they're dead.
And I've seen that in other cases where offenders have just never told, never spoken, no matter how much victims' families try to get that information, they hang on to it. And I think that psychologically is about power and control to the last.
The true extent of Keyes' crimes may never be known. By taking his own life, he denied many families across America the right to know exactly what had happened to a loved one who had disappeared. A loved one who may have lost their life at the hands of Israel Keyes.
I would never say you could ever have a grudging admiration, because it is too contemptible and malign. But you have to acknowledge that this man was exceptionally good at what he did.
He's been convicted of 3 individual murders, but it's thought that he could have killed up to 11 people, possibly more.
Because of the way he toyed with investigators and the fact that he's now dead, it's highly unlikely we will ever know the true total of his victims.
He's probably one of the lesser-known serial killers globally, and that's mainly because there was no trial. He killed himself pre-trial, so you didn't get the media hype, you didn't get the media sensation, the monster tag, if you like. So his cunning and his ingenuity in committing these crimes was never really put into print and put out into the world.
It's the final cruelty from them is that they leave everyone in abeyance, their lives stuck, never knowing what happened, never knowing the full story. There's no closure ever, and it's their one last gesture of cruelty, really.
The investigation can go on, and people will be asking questions as to why you're doing it. The answer, of course, is for the families of the deceased. So that is not something that they have control of.